Whispers in Stone. Julian Mercer preferred the company of history to people. At 34, he had built a respectable career as a historical archivist at the Westfield Museum, where ancient artifacts spoke to him in ways humans rarely did. His colleagues regarded him as brilliant but aloof, a man who could recite the detailed provenance of a 16th-century manuscript but struggled with small talk in the break room. The museum's marble halls were Julian's sanctuary, their cool silence, broken only by the occasional footsteps of visitors. Today, those footsteps included his own as he made his way to the director's office, a folder of research notes tucked under his arm. "Julian, come in," Director Hammond said, gesturing to a chair. "I have a special project for you. There's a small antique shop downtown, Donovan's Curiosities. The owner claims to have discovered some medieval stone carvings in her basement. Probably nothing, but worth checking." Julian nodded, secretly pleased to escape the museum for a day. "I'll go this afternoon." Donovan's Curiosities occupied a narrow Victorian building wedged between a coffee shop and a bookstore. The display window featured an eclectic array of items: a brass telescope, vintage jewelry boxes, and a collection of weathered maps in wooden frames. A bell chimed softly as Julian entered. The interior was dimly lit, with wooden shelves stretching to the ceiling and narrow aisles between display cases. The air smelled of old books and furniture polish. "Hello?" Julian called out, navigating around a table laden with porcelain figurines. "Back here," a woman's voice responded. Following the sound, Julian found her kneeling beside an open trapdoor in the floor, a flashlight in hand. She looked up, and Julian felt an unexpected jolt. Her eyes were a striking shade of amber, framed by loose strands of copper hair that had escaped her messy bun. "Freya Donovan," she said, rising to her feet and dusting off her hands. "You must be from the museum." "Julian Mercer," he replied, automatically extending his hand. Her grip was firm, her fingers cool against his palm. "So you're the artifact expert," Freya said, studying him with unnerving directness. "Come see what I've found." She led him to the trapdoor and down a narrow staircase into a basement storeroom. In the corner, partially wrapped in old blankets, lay 3 stone fragments with distinct carvings. Julian knelt beside them, immediately forgetting about Freya's presence as he slipped on gloves and carefully examined each piece. "Norman," he murmured after several minutes. "Late 11th century, possibly from a church or monastery." "I knew they were special," Freya said, crouching beside him. "They were hidden behind a false wall. I only found them because I was fixing a water leak." Julian glanced at her, noticing the shadows beneath her eyes and a faint scar along her jawline. "These are significant finds. The museum would be interested in acquiring them." Something flickered across Freya's face. Hesitation, perhaps even fear. "I'm not sure I want to sell them." "May I ask how you came to own this building?" Julian asked, professional curiosity overriding his usual reticence. "It was my uncle's," she said, her voice softening. "He left it to me when he died 3 years ago. I moved here from Portland to start over." She stopped abruptly, as if she'd said too much. Julian recognized the barrier that had suddenly risen between them. He respected it. Understanding personal. "Boundaries better than most. The museum could authenticate the pieces," he offered. "You'd maintain ownership, but they could be documented properly." Freya considered this, twisting a silver ring on her right hand. "All right," she agreed finally, "but I have conditions." As they negotiated terms, Julian found himself increasingly intrigued by Freya Donovan. Unlike the artifacts he studied, her history wasn't laid bare for examination. There were depths to her, stories untold. When she smiled, a rare occurrence that transformed her face, Julian felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest. Later, as he cataloged the stone fragments in the museum's laboratory, Julian found himself thinking not of their historical significance, but of the woman who had discovered them. Freya Donovan was a mystery, and for the first time in years, Julian wanted to understand something beyond the realm of history. Faded photographs. The stone fragments from Freya's shop sat on Julian's workbench under specialized lighting. He'd been studying them for 2 weeks, fascinated by their craftsmanship and the story they might tell. But increasingly, his thoughts drifted to their owner. He found himself making excuses to visit Donovan's curiosities, questions about the fragment's discovery, paperwork for the museum, discussions about their historical context. Each visit revealed another layer of Freya's enigmatic personality. She was knowledgeable about her merchandise, passionate about history, and possessed a dry wit that caught Julian off guard. Yet there remained an unmistakable guardedness to her, moments when her smile would fade and her eyes would drift to the shop's entrance as if expecting someone unwelcome. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Julian arrived at the museum to find a voicemail from Freya. Her voice was tight with distress. "Julian, it's Freya. There's been an incident at the shop. If you could come by, I'd appreciate your expertise." He found the shop's front window shattered, glass scattered across the sidewalk. 2 police officers stood inside, taking notes as Freya gestured toward the damage. When she saw Julian, relief visibly washed over her face. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading him past the officers. "Someone broke in last night. They didn't take much, some silver pieces, a Victorian pocket watch, but they went through everything. It feels personal." The shop had been ransacked, display cases emptied, drawers pulled out. But Julian noticed something odd. The intruder had been selective. Valuable items remained untouched, while seemingly random pieces were taken. "Were the stone fragments disturbed?" Julian asked. "No, they're at the museum, remember?" "But—" Freya hesitated, glancing at the officers before lowering her voice. "They went through my apartment upstairs. My personal things." After the police left, promising increased patrols, Freya locked the door and flipped the sign to "closed." "Would you like to see what they were really after?" she asked Julian, an edge to her voice he hadn't heard before. Upstairs, Freya's apartment was a stark contrast to the cluttered shop. Minimalist furnishings, white walls adorned with a few abstract paintings, bookshelves organized by subject and author. The only disruption to this order was her bedroom, where clothes and papers were strewn across the floor. Freya knelt beside her bed and pulled out a wooden box. This was hidden in a wall safe. They found it. Inside lay a collection of photographs, newspaper clippings, and a small leather journal. Julian recognized one of the photos, a younger Freya standing beside a tall man with sharp features and cold eyes. They were in a gallery, champagne glasses in hand, surrounded by artwork. "Thomas Harrington," Freya said, her finger hovering over the man's face. "Famous art dealer, philanthropist, my former fiancé, and the reason I changed my name and moved across the country." Julian looked up sharply, but Freya's expression stopped any questions. "I'm not ready to talk about him," she said, gathering the box's contents. "But whoever broke in was looking for these." As Julian helped Freya clean up, he noticed a framed photograph she'd missed. It showed the same gallery, but the glass was cracked and the frame bent, as if someone had deliberately damaged it. In the background, partially obscured, hung a painting Julian recognized instantly. The Gardener's Daughter, a masterpiece stolen from a European museum 5 years ago. That night, unable to sleep, Julian searched online for information about Thomas Harrington. News articles described a respected London art dealer whose career had ended in scandal and allegations of fraud. None mentioned Freya. But in one gallery opening photo, Julian spotted her in the background, her expression tense as she watched Harrington charm potential buyers. The next morning, Julian arrived at Donovan's Curiosities with coffee and pastries. Freya was installing a new security system, her movements precise despite obvious exhaustion. "I brought breakfast," Julian offered, setting the items on the counter. "And a proposition. Let me help you document everything in the shop. Create a detailed inventory with photographs, for insurance purposes." It was more than professional. Interest that motivated him, and they both knew it. Freya studied him for a long moment before nodding. "All right," she agreed. "But Julian, be careful. Getting involved with me, it's complicated." "Most valuable things are," he replied quietly, surprising himself with his boldness. As they worked side by side over the following days, cataloging antiques and repairing damage, Julian felt the familiar walls he'd built around himself beginning to crack. Freya's presence, her quiet determination, her occasional unguarded laughter, drew him in ways no ancient artifact ever had. And when their hands accidentally touched as they reached for the same item, the connection felt more significant than any historical discovery. The locked cabinet. 3 weeks after the break-in, Julian and Freya had settled into a comfortable routine. Mornings at the museum, afternoons helping at the shop, evenings spent discussing history over takeout food in her apartment. Julian found himself opening up about his childhood in foster care, his scholarship to university, his retreat into academia when relationships proved too difficult to navigate. Freya shared less, but enough for Julian to understand she'd once lived a very different life. Art galleries in London, charity galas in New York, summer homes in the Mediterranean. She spoke of these experiences with detachment, as if describing someone else's life. The stone fragments had yielded unexpected connections to a medieval monastery with ties to an ancient order of scholar monks. Julian was preparing a paper on his findings, with Freya as co-author. Their professional collaboration had blossomed into friendship, and perhaps something more, though neither had put words to the subtle shift between them. That equilibrium shattered on a Thursday afternoon when Julian received a call from Director Hammond. "Julian, there's someone here asking about you. A private investigator named Blackwood. He's inquiring about the Norman fragments and their owner." Julian's stomach clenched. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing specific. Client confidentiality. But he seemed particularly interested in your relationship with Ms. Donovan." After hanging up, Julian tried calling Freya, but she didn't answer. Fighting. Rising panic, he left the museum and drove to her shop. The closed sign hung in the window, but Julian noticed the lights were on in her apartment above. Using the spare key Freya had given him for emergencies, Julian entered through the back door. The shop was silent, everything in its place. He called Freya's name, receiving no response. Upstairs, her apartment door stood ajar. "Freya," Julian called again, pushing the door open wider. The apartment was immaculate as always, but Julian sensed something was wrong. On the kitchen counter lay Freya's phone and wallet, items she would never leave behind. In her study, Julian found scattered papers and an open laptop. The screen displayed a flight booking site with a one-way ticket to Vancouver for that evening. Next to the laptop was a half-packed suitcase containing practical clothing and a small jewelry box. She was running again. Julian sat heavily in Freya's desk chair, conflicted. Should he respect her privacy or investigate further? As he debated, his gaze fell on a legal document partially hidden beneath the laptop. A restraining order against Thomas Harrington, filed under the name Caroline Ellis. Caroline Ellis. Freya's real name. Before Julian could process this discovery, he heard footsteps on the shop's stairs. He moved quickly to the apartment door, hoping to see Freya. Instead, he came face to face with a man in an expensive suit, salt and pepper hair framing, a face Julian recognized from his research. Thomas Harrington. "You must be the archivist," Harrington said, his British accent refined, but his tone cold. "I've been following your work with Caroline, or Freya, as she calls herself now." Julian blocked the doorway. "Ms. Donovan isn't here. I suggest you leave before I call the police." Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Come now, let's be civilized. Caroline and I have unfinished business. Those stone fragments she discovered, they were part of our collection. Stolen property. Your collection of stolen artwork, you mean, Julian replied, his mind racing. I know about the gardener's daughter and the other pieces that disappeared. Something dangerous flashed across Harrington's face. You're out of your depth, archivist. Caroline was my partner in every sense. She helped acquire those pieces, authenticated them, arranged private sales. Then she got cold feet, threatened to expose everything. Took items of significant value when she vanished, including evidence against you, Julian guessed, thinking of the photographs in Freya's wooden box. Smart man, Harrington acknowledged. Tell Caroline I want what's mine. She has until tomorrow. After that, he shrugged elegantly. Well, the police might be interested in her role in several international art thefts. After Harrington left, Julian searched the apartment for clues to Freya's whereabouts. In the bedroom closet, hidden behind a panel, he found a small fireproof safe. Through trial and error, Freya's birth date, the shop's address, Julian eventually tried the acquisition date of the Norman fragments. The safe opened to reveal a USB drive, a passport in the name Caroline Ellis, and a handwritten note. West, Harbor Lighthouse, Storage Unit 17. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. Julian knew the location, a renovated lighthouse that now served as a tourist attraction and artisan marketplace about 30 miles up the coast. Without hesitation, he grabbed the USB drive and headed to his car. Brushstrokes of truth. The coastal highway wound alongside cliffs that dropped sharply to the churning sea below. Julian drove faster than his usual cautious pace, his mind replaying every interaction with Freya, searching for clues he might have missed. West Harbor Lighthouse stood on a rocky promontory, its white tower gleaming against the darkening sky. Behind it, a row of converted boathouses now housed artists' studios and small shops. At the far end, Julian found a block of storage units. Unit 17's padlock opened with the same code as Freya's safe. Inside, Julian discovered a medium-sized wooden crate. Using a crowbar hanging on the wall, he carefully pried it open to reveal a canvas wrapped in protective material. With trembling hands, Julian unwrapped it. The gardener's daughter was even more beautiful in person, a young woman in a sunlit garden, her expression caught between innocence and knowing. The brushwork was exquisite, the colors vibrant despite the painting's age. I was going to return it anonymously. Julian turned to find Freya standing in the doorway, rain dripping from her coat. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. You found my note, she said, stepping inside and sliding the door closed behind her. Harrington came to your apartment, Julian told her. He's threatening to go to the police about your involvement. Freya's laugh was hollow. Of course he is. She moved, closer to the painting, her fingers hovering just above the canvas without touching it. I didn't steal this, Julian. I rescued it. They sat on plastic storage containers as Freya finally shared her complete story. Born Caroline Ellis to wealthy parents who valued appearances above all, she had studied art history with dreams of museum curation. Instead, she'd met Thomas Harrington at a gallery opening. Charming, brilliant, passionate about art. He mentored me, then romanced me, then controlled me, Freya explained, her voice steady but her hands twisting in her lap. At first I was flattered by his attention, then I was trapped by it. Harrington's legitimate art dealing had masked a sophisticated forgery and theft operation. He had used Caroline's expertise to authenticate works and her family connections, to access private collections. When I realized what was happening, I confronted him. Freya's hand unconsciously touched the scar along her jawline. He made it clear what would happen if I betrayed him. Nevertheless, she had planned her escape meticulously, documenting Harrington's crimes while pretending to remain loyal. The night she fled, She took only what she needed to build a new identity and the evidence that would protect her from his retaliation, and the gardener's daughter, which she couldn't bear to leave in his possession. I've spent 3 years looking. Over my shoulder, Freya concluded. The Norman fragments were genuine. My uncle really did own this building, and I really did find them. I thought working with the museum might give me legitimacy, a new start. I never expected to meet someone like you. Julian, overwhelmed by her revelations and his own feelings, reached for her hand. Let me help you. We'll take the evidence to the FBI's art crime team, apply for witness protection if necessary. Freya's fingers tightened around his. You'd risk your career? Your reputation? Some things matter more, Julian said simply. As they carefully rewrapped the painting, Julian's phone rang. Director Hammond. Julian, that investigator, returned with police. They're asking about stolen artifacts allegedly connected to Ms. Donovan. I've stalled them, but you need to know. They have a warrant. After hanging up, Julian turned to Freya. We need a different plan. Gallery of Second Chances dawn broke over the museum's rooftop garden, painting the sky in delicate pinks and golds. Julian and Freya sat side by side on a stone bench, watching the city below come to life. The painting and USB drive were locked. In Director Hammond's private safe after a night of explanations and planning. The FBI agent will be here at 9, Julian said, checking his watch. Are you ready? Freya nodded, her face composed, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety. I've been running for so long. It's strange to consider stopping. The previous night had been transformative. Director Hammond, initially shocked by their midnight arrival and incredible story, had quickly become their ally. A former military, intelligence officer before her museum career, Hammond had connections in federal law enforcement and a moral compass that pointed unfailingly toward justice. Harrington's been on their radar for years, she'd told them after making several calls. But they've never had enough evidence to build a case. The USB drive contained everything the authorities would need: financial records of black market sales, communications with forgers, photographs of stolen artwork in Harrington's private vault, and most damning, a video recording of Harrington threatening Caroline when she'd expressed doubts about their latest acquisition. You look different, Julian observed, studying Freya's profile in the morning light. She turned to him with a small smile. It's strange. I feel lighter, even with everything that's about to happen. Witness protection might mean another new identity, Julian reminded her gently. I know, Freya said. But this time it would be a beginning, not an escape. Their meeting with FBI Special Agent Morales was intense but productive. For 3 hours, Freya detailed her history with Harrington and presented her evidence. The agent was particularly interested in connections to other cases involving stolen antiquities. Ms. Ellis, Morales said, using Freya's legal name, your testimony could help us recover dozens of cultural treasures and put away some very dangerous people. We can offer you protection, but I won't lie. It won't be easy. I understand, Freya replied. I just want it to be over. The operation moved quickly after that. By afternoon, Harrington had been detained while attempting to access Freya's shop. The private investigator he'd hired was taken in for questioning. News outlets reported only that authorities were investigating an international art theft ring with connections to London and New York. For the next 6 weeks, Julian and Freya existed in a strange limbo. She stayed in a safe house while continuing to work remotely with the FBI. Julian divided his time between the museum and secured visits with Freya, their relationship deepening despite the uncertainty of their future. The Norman fragments proved to be exactly what they appeared: valuable, historical artifacts legally obtained. Their discovery and Julian's subsequent research brought positive attention to the museum, culminating in a special exhibition featuring the fragments alongside other medieval stonework. On opening night, Julian stood alone by his display, accepting congratulations from colleagues while scanning the crowd for a face he hadn't seen in 3 days. "The craftsmanship is remarkable," said a familiar voice behind him. Julian turned to find Freya, her hair shorter and darker, but her eyes unmistakable. "You came," he said, fighting the urge to embrace her in the crowded gallery. "I couldn't miss your big night," she replied. "Besides, I have news." They slipped away to the rooftop garden, now illuminated by strings of soft lights. "Harrington took a plea deal," Freya told him. "He's giving up his contacts in exchange for a reduced sentence, because of my cooperation and the fact that I voluntarily returned the gardener's daughter. I won't face charges." Julian exhaled the breath he'd been holding for weeks. "What happens now?" "I don't need witness protection after all. Most of Harrington's associates are more concerned with avoiding prosecution than seeking revenge." Freya smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I can stay Caroline Ellis if I want, reclaim my life, or, Julian prompted, "or I could stay Freya Donovan, keep my shop, maybe expand into art restoration. I've been offered a consulting position with the FBI's art crime team. Part-time, mostly remote work." Julian took her hands in his. "And us?" "That depends," Freya said, suddenly uncertain. "You fell for a woman with secrets. Now that they're gone—" Julian shook his head, drawing her closer. "I fell for the woman who loves history as much as I do, who rebuilt her life from nothing, who showed me that connecting with the present can be as meaningful as preserving the past." Under the stars, surrounded by ancient stonework and new possibilities, Julian and Freya sealed their future with a kiss. Two people who had spent years hiding in the shadows of their pasts, finally stepping together into the light. In the gallery, below, amid artifacts that had survived centuries of turmoil, a new history was being written. Not carved in stone, but no less enduring. A testament to the power of truth, the courage to begin again, and the transformative nature of understanding. Someone completely in loving them anyway.